I'm blown away by this week's episode. We had Bob Helig on the podcast who left us with a ton of stories, golden nuggets, and lessons, and really showed us how to break through revenue plateaus using your mind and messaging. This may be one of the best episodes we've ever had on the podcast, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I am glad you guys are here because we have a great episode lined up for you. And it's a great episode because this is somebody that I met probably within the last year or two, but we've been running in the same circles for a while. And the more I got to know this person, the more I realized that we are so aligned in the way we run our businesses, even our messages, and it makes me really happy to welcome another parent entrepreneur to the podcast. So today we have Mr. Bob Helig from Your Virtual Upline. So Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you. And before we get into your story, which I've never heard your story before, so I'm really excited to dig into it because I know to get to where you are today probably was not a very simple or easy journey. But before we get into that, can you just let everyone know what it is you do and how you help people?
Yeah. So our company is called Your Virtual Upline. We do leadership training and development for network marketing professionals. So people that are in the MLM direct sales space. My business today consists of two different membership programs that we have. And we do, content and coaching, live events, those types of things.
Okay, great. And I just want to start off with one question. And I didn't prepare you for this, so I apologize if this catches you off guard. But the MLM space tends to get a bad rap. And when I look at this space, I personally have a different view on it. I think part of the reason why it gets a bad rap is because people don't treat it like an actual business. And what I love about what you do is you treat it like a real actual business. But what do you say to the people that kind of like roll their eyes when they hear MLM or any of those types of businesses?
Yeah, a lot of that comes really from ignorance in terms of the actual nature of the business. Right. Most people really don't fully understand what we do. And the reason for that, I like to call it a self-inflicted wound. The bad perception that exists today is something that we really created ourselves, because there is so many people that are in this profession that, like you said, they just don't really understand what it means to run a business, but they're being driven by something. So we teach a very unique philosophy that we call love, serve, grow. And I know we'll get into messaging. You helped me tremendously with clarifying our message, but we teach a very radically different way to think about and approach building a business in that space. Now, the philosophy really can be applied to any kind of business, but it's based on this idea that what most people do when they're driven by scarcity and fear in their business. And this leads them to something that we call a sales mindset. So when we have a sales mindset, we're really focused on doing things that really are driven to create personal results for ourselves, but they're not necessarily us focusing on how what we do can help other people. And this will always happen because if you're being driven by fear and scarcity, you'll always believe you have to get in order to feel better about yourself. So it leads people to doing things that just rub people the wrong way, right? And I think social media has been like lighter fluid on this, because the way that people show up and the way that they talk about what they do and the way they interact with people about their business just rubs people the wrong way. Right. So we teach this thing called Love, Serve, Grow that is based on this idea that if you can understand what it means to put love at the center of your business in your life. And that for us really means that having the foundation of strong belief in yourself, that gives you the foundation instead of selling to actually serve, to have a service mindset, to start thinking about what you're doing more through the context of how my products and services can help other people, not just help myself. And when we shift from sales to service, everything we do changes. The way we interact with people, the things we talk about, we stop trying to push how great our products and business are to people and making them feel bad about their lives and in an attempt to get us to join, right? These are all the typical things that like give MLM a bad name.
Right.
And we truly start looking at what we do as a vehicle for something more important, which is really solving problems and helping people transform their lives. And my experience of the profession has been very different. This profession completely changed my life, and I saw what it's done for so many other people. And there are so many incredible people that get what I'm talking about right now that do this, but that's not the experience of most people. Most people that are out there that have a bad perception of what we do, it's because they encountered a well-intentioned, good, most of these people are not bad people.
Right.
They just didn't know any better.
Right.
And that one interaction or handful of interactions with multiple people then formed a perception on what they thought what we do is. And it's actually not that.
And that makes so much sense. And that's what I love about you. And I loved working with you so much, is because I feel like you are going out there and you're disrupting or changing the narrative that so many people have been experiencing, which is obviously what we do with messaging, we help people with, but you really are going out there and kind of changing that story that has been written for a lot of people. And you're totally right. It comes down to people just not knowing any better. And I would even imagine a lot of these companies too are telling you to just do things that probably aren't the best. And I would feel like a lot of these companies aren't even providing the right types of training in order to, have a long sustaining business. And again, every business company I'm sure is different and, whatever, but that's what I love about you guys and what you do specifically is about changing the narrative. It's kind of thought reversaling, shifting people's perspective, but in a way that takes away suffering. It's love driven.
Yeah.
So I love that. So how did you get into all of this? Were you always an entrepreneur? Did you happen to fall into this? Where did your story begin?
My traditional career was in medical sales. So corporate sales. I was, trained in that my whole life. And I was introduced to the network marketing profession as a distributor in 2011. I was in my medical sales career. There was a lot of uncertainty. I was becoming really frustrated. I just felt like there had to be a better way. I was always driven to entrepreneurship as an idea. I just never really understood my place in that world because I didn't come from a family that owned businesses. It was just never something that was talked about.
What were you frustrated with? When you were in that job, what kind of frustrations were you experiencing?
Well, it was the same frustration that everybody has in a job, working harder and harder every year to make the same amount of money and sometimes less money. I was with a company that was going through some restructuring. So there was in 1 year, there were 2 rounds of layoffs that happened where I found myself literally am I even going to have a job? And there was this interesting moment for me. I'll never forget it. People always say you can't predict your future. And I say that's not necessarily true because we do have these moments in our life where if we're paying attention, we can see our future clearly. And I remember the second time that the company that I was working for was going through this restructuring. And it basically was this, my boss called me, my boss, Steve, he was one of the best managers in the company. And this was the conversation. You're going to get a phone call tomorrow. It's either going to be from me telling you still have a job, or you'll get a call from HR saying, giving you your instructions on how you're going to not have a job.
Oh my God. First of all, why would you even
by the way, this is not uncommon in the pharmaceutical medical sales.
Seriously? Why would they even tell you that? Just don't even tell me so I could live one night of just not being stressed out.
This
That's
kind of
crazy.
stuff happens quite a lot.
Wow.
And,
I didn't know.
But here's what I'll never forget. I asked my boss, Steve, I said, well, Steve, I was like, are you okay?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget what he said to me. He goes, I don't know.
Wow.
And, here I am, my boss, Steve, at the time I was probably 35 years old. My boss was 55, married, kids. I was single. The truth of it is if I got laid off, well, whatever, I'd have been okay. I'd have found another job.
Right.
But, my boss, Steve, at 55 years old and 2 kids and a family to support, that would have been a little bit of a harder thing for him to deal with. And it was in that moment, I'm literally, this is the guy that I'm supposed to want to be someday. I'm going to spend the next 20 years of my life being him to find myself in the same position. I'm there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And that was when I was introduced to the idea, to the network marketing profession. And what I loved about it for a person like me, who had no business being in business for himself, wouldn't even know where to start, it gave me this easy track to get started in, where you can be in business for yourself, but not by yourself. We like to say you have a company that puts together all the infrastructure. All you have to do is really go out and leverage what they've created. But I like to say that particular business, and you could say this probably for any business, it starts out as a personal development program with a compensation plan attached.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship is this way as well, Brandon. I know anybody that, that's listening can attest to this. It's like when you plant your flag in the ground and you say, I got a dream and I want to build something. It's almost like the tests begin to show up.
Yeah.
And I use the analogy, it's like a spotlight gets shined down on you. And that spotlight brings to the surface all of the things about yourself that you don't want to admit to anybody, all your fears and self-doubts and insecurity.
Yeah.
They come to the surface and you're forced to face them every day. And the truth of it is, in my experience, the reason why most people don't succeed as entrepreneurs is because they're not willing to face that stuff. It's easier for them to just fall back into the same rut that they've always been, the certainty of what they know, than it is for them to constantly do the hard work of growing yourself. And that's what we teach our students, right? Is that it really starts with belief in yourself and your willingness to see that seed of greatness that's inside of you that maybe you've never recognized was there, that people spent your whole life telling you that it wasn't there, what you couldn't do. I had plenty of people tell me what I couldn't do. I had to start believing that they were wrong.
Right.
And it was like, that's where it started. And that was kind of how I began my journey. So I spent 3 years in, doing network marketing on the side while I was working my job, building it up slowly but surely, and got to the point where I was able to walk away from my medical sales career. And I had a full-time career as an entrepreneur in that space for 5 years. And it was incredible. And it was life-changing for me.
Wow. Okay. Couple questions. Number one, did you end up keeping your job when he told you that you'd find out the next day?
I did keep my job. Yeah.
Okay.
I kept that job.
Okay. Number two, what were some of the insecurities and fears you had in that first 3 years of starting your business that you had to overcome?
Yeah. Well, my biggest one was public speaking.
Oh, interesting.
My biggest fear my whole life was public speaking.
Did you know that before you started? Okay.
My whole, I was very aware. I was mortified to talk in public. I never raised my hand in class. God forbid I'm on an elevator and you say something to me. Like, I don't talk on elevators. I don't talk on planes. Like, first thing I do when I sit down, I put my headphones on, my head's in a book, do not say a word. I'm not rude. And I like people. I just I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
But I always had this terrible fear of public speaking, which stemmed from some programming when I was younger, some things that happened to me that created trauma, that I created this story that I didn't have anything important to say. And I started to believe that. And I started to find, my belief shaped the way that I experienced the world. I started to look for all this proof that I was shy, I was introverted, I wasn't that. And I went through my whole life avoiding speaking in public.
Yeah.
And then I joined this business. And to this day, I could kill the person that signed me up into the business because he sat across the table from me. And I remember saying to him, it was $500 to start the business. And I was getting ready to write the check. And I looked at him. His name was Mike. He was a UPS driver.
Yep. And
I said, Mike, I'm going to write this check, but only on one condition. I'm never going to do what you just did, because he just gave a presentation to me. I'm like, I'm never going to do that. And he looked right back across the table and lied right to my face and said, you'll never have to do it. And I realized really quick that wasn't true, because every day now I've got to talk to people about my business, about my products. I have to face rejection. I'm in these situations where I have to talk to people I don't know. And I have these people joining my team, and I have to lead them, and I have to train them. And I'm doing all these things that I hate doing, because I'm conflicted with this limiting belief that I have about myself that I can't do it. And I want it, but I'm not seeing progress because I was holding myself back. We have a word for it. We like to use the term red light story.
Yeah.
So we call it limiting beliefs, red light stories, right? So we tell ourselves this red light story in the moment, which stops us in our tracks. And, one of two things happen. We don't take the actions out of fear because we just believe that we're not capable, and why try anyway? Or we go through the motions and we do the things, but we don't see the results, because what we like to say is, limiting beliefs guarantee limited results in your life. One of the most important things we teach our students is your actions don't create your results.
Mm.
And I'll prove it right now to everybody that's listening.
Yeah, go ahead.
How many of you are already literally doing and saying everything that Brandon has taught you, everything you've learned from every other guru and mentor that's out there, and you still aren't seeing any results?
Yeah.
How's that possible?
Yeah.
Well, it's only possible because your actions don't matter if you don't have the right belief and intention behind it, right? You need the foundation of strong belief. Otherwise, you're going to just go through the motions. So there I was going through the motions, never understanding that it was my own lack of belief in myself that was keeping me from what I want. And it wasn't until I began to reach the point of literally like something has to change or I can't do this anymore that I finally realized that something that had to change was me.
Mm.
You know, I spent the first year of my entrepreneurial career thinking that it was someone else's problem, right? I was really quick to blame or look to my circumstances or the things that, you know, that I saw as obstacles to me being able to do it. And it wasn't until I realized that there were plenty of other examples in the world of people that did it despite all those things. And I had to get really clear on the fact that I was the problem. And what I realized was, and this was the early stages of the birth of what I teach today. I mean, I didn't have a name for it. How could I possibly have known 20 years later? I literally I built a company based on this idea. What I realized was that I didn't love myself.
Wow.
And the way that I recognized that is I started to pay attention to the way that I talk to myself. And, you know, as somebody that's a father that has 2 kids today, this idea really resonates with me. I always tell our students, I say, if you have children, pay attention to the way you talk to yourself for the next couple of days. And then ask yourself, would you ever talk to your kids that way?
Wow. That's powerful.
And the answer is no. And it sounds weird to say, well, I didn't love myself. What's that mean? Well, loving yourself is really just acknowledging and accepting the fact that you have worth regardless of what you do or what you accomplish in life. And when I got really rooted in the fact that I was worthy, whether or not I achieved or did, and I started to see that seed of greatness, as I like to call it, that I was capable, and that if I just gave myself a chance by starting to change the way that I looked at myself, that became for me the turning point for something so much different. And that was, so I started doing things I had never done before. I started speaking in public and I wasn't great. And I stumbled, but I did it and I started to learn and I grew. And it's crazy because I share this story and then here I am 20 years later and I look at what I do today and I think, how crazy is it that something that was always one of my biggest fears in life was actually just a reflection of one of the greatest gifts that I had been given.
Wow.
And that's what to me, like that is like my calling, my mission, like my ministry and the work that I do is teaching people how to see what it took me so long to see inside of myself, to teach them how to see that into themselves so that they can ignite a new belief that something bigger is possible through their life. And then here we insert this vehicle that we call network marketing, that I think is one of the easiest paths into entrepreneurship that exists because there's support systems and structure and leadership and mentorship in place. Yeah. And that's where it all comes together for me, is being able to see that this is a vehicle that has helped me become something so much more, that can do it for others. But the problem is they're just not operating from the right perspective and the right plan. And that's what we give them with what we teach.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I don't even know where I want to take it, but
yeah, so you know, like I will give the most longest like run on answers to the simplest
but it was,
I start talking about this stuff and I get fired up.
And that's the thing that was so amazing to hear and to like watch the conviction, and hopefully you guys are watching the video, but to see your conviction and to even hear the tones up and down and slowing down at the right, like you are a powerful, powerful speaker. And what kind of breaks my heart a little bit is that, you know, you were at a place where you're like, I am not a powerful speaker. And it came from a place of lack of love or self-worth, of I'm not worthy and I have nothing to say. I think that's even what you said. I have nothing worth saying. And then to now know that you are serving thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people and changing their lives. How many listeners right now, and this is the part that breaks my heart, is how many listeners right now have those red light stories that is stopping them from going out and changing the lives of thousands and thousands of people. You were able to overcome it. And I hope every listener can look at you as an example of realizing your full potential, and like not even your full potential of what you can have, but how many lives are not being affected because you have a red light story running. And I mean, that was really, really powerful. And
well, you know, the other part of it, man,
yep.
is it's learning how, because I know probably a lot of the people that are listening to this, they can relate with that part of my journey because they're in that right now.
Right.
They're in those first couple of years of trying to build their business. They feel very alone. They're questioning, maybe this just isn't for me. They're on that verge of losing hope. I think the powerful realization is understanding. And, you know, I think I first heard Tony Robbins say this, and it's so true that, you know, you there's one of two different ways you can view life. It's either happening for you or it's happening against you.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is we've been talking now for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. I haven't talked for 1 second about how much money I've made or how much followers I have on social media or how many listeners we have of our podcast. I haven't talked at all about that.
Right.
All I've talked about is the challenging part of my story. And the lesson that I try to teach people is you connect with people through pain and suffering.
Yep.
People won't buy your success until they first buy your pain. And what's so powerful for me is when I get on stage and talk to people, the part of my story that they relate to the most is the most challenging parts. And I think sometimes when we're in the middle of that, it's easy for us to lose hope and lose sight of the bigger purpose of the challenges we go through. You know, there is no testimony without a test. And if we can continue to believe that these things are happening for us, some of the most difficult moments of my life, some of the biggest failures that I was like, man, what else is going to, like, what do I have to do? I so clearly see them now as things that happened for me, because those were the moments that I was forced to grow and evolve and become better. And I'm so thankful for that. But a lot of times when we're in the middle of it, it's easy for us to forget that.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important thing, is that what you're going through right now, I promise you, when you're on stage or when you're creating your course or you're doing your first live event, the number one thing you're going to talk about is what you're dealing with right now. And that's going to give you the ability. People will trust you because they know you will understand the pain that they've gone through. That will give you influence with them, and that will make you a better leader. Yeah. And it's really important for people to realize that.
It's incredibly important. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things I talk about too, is like one of my biggest challenges that I've had was being $40,000 in debt 3 years ago. Like, we were successful and then I just gave it all up and found myself in debt. That was probably the hardest moment in my entrepreneurial journey, but it is the number one thing that people connect with me the most on. That and like being a family man and having kids and talking about the challenges of kids. But it's the challenges that allow you to really connect with people. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, is like, you know, the steps. You have the strategy. There's all these other things that you have to go through, like the growth. You have to have those stories in order to connect. You have to be able to grow personally, because the steps don't matter. Like, you're not going to be able to just get up and just spout information and steps and give people strategies and information and grow a successful business. You need those challenges in order to relate, in order to have that personal growth journey and all that stuff.
100%.
And
so you want me, can I share the second part of my story?
Yeah, of course.
That's just, so let me share the part of my story that's going to probably be more relatable to the people that are listening, in terms of like my foray into the online business world, right?
Yeah, because I think where we left off in the story, it was like you were 3 years into it. And then,
so I'm in a network marketing career, and I'm at the top of the world and everything's going great. And, you know, we talk about challenges and failure either make you bitter or better.
Yep.
I had that decision in 2015 because the company that I was working with, out of the blue, shut down our marketing division. So I went from literally being on top of the world, thinking that, you know, this is the rest of my life, to I'm 39 years old, newly engaged. And I'm like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Can I ask how much money you were making then at that point?
So I was making multiple six figures. Okay. I was, you know, making about $250,000 a year in that company.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, it was, you know, that was way more money than I ever thought possible for myself. And, and it was growing steadily, and then the rug was completely yanked out from under me.
Yeah.
So I had, I took a breather and regrouped and said, okay, so I'm not going to lose faith in what I'm doing. So let me just go find another place to do it. So I connected with some good friends of mine and I joined another company, and that was going well. And then 7 months later, in August of 2015, that company actually in one of the most high profile cases ever it got shut down by the federal government.
Ugh.
Kind of a witch hunt.
Yeah.
And it wound up that the owner of the company wound up being, essentially found like not guilty of what they were accusing him. But when the FTC kind of goes after you publicly, you lose whether you win or lose.
Yeah, exactly.
The company was destroyed.
Yeah. And
I was literally the second time in 7 months, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, is this a sign? What do I do? Here's an interesting thing. It's like, it's interesting the timing of how things happen. I'm a person of faith, so I believe, this was all God's plan for my life personally anyway. Yeah. But 2 weeks, get this, 2 weeks before that second company got shut down, I went to my first marketing conference ever. Okay. It was in Orlando, Florida. I sat in the room for 3 days with my two friends. And at the end of the event came the big pitch for the $30,000 mastermind.
Yep.
I was like, all right, this dude, he's doing it. I went through it the first time and I'm like, okay, maybe I need to be smarter. I hear everybody talking about doing videos, building a personal brand. Maybe that would be a smart thing for me to do, but I'd never done a video before on social media. I barely even used Facebook. It was just like a thing I just dumped stupid posts on. I wasn't using it for marketing.
Yeah.
But I was like, I need to do it. But here was the problem, is that same fear of public speaking that I got over in my business was coming back up when it came to the idea of doing a video. Ah,
interesting.
And it was like my two friends who were already doing it, they hounded me for 8 months. You got to do a video. Got to do a video. And I was like, I know. But I didn't need to do it, but I knew I should. I went to this marketing conference. This guy that was one of the, top thought leaders in that space was like, I'm doing a mastermind. I'll teach you how to do it. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll do it. I didn't have 30 grand. I literally liquidated a 401k that I had left over from when I worked a job many, many years ago. There was like $40,000 in there. I liquidated it, took the tax hit, sent that money to him, paid for the mastermind, did not tell my fiance because I'm like, she would never let me do it.
Right.
I'm in this business that's barely treading water, making money. And then a week later, the company gets shut down.
Oh my gosh. Oh
right?
my gosh. Yeah.
And I'm like, first thing I think about is the mastermind. I'm like, what do I do? Do I ask for my money back? And I'm like, no, I'm like, I can't. It's because what's interesting, in the moment, I bet on myself.
Right.
I was like, I choose to see inside of myself the potential to do this if I just have the right training in the right direction. So I stuck it out, and I didn't tell my wife, and we literally almost didn't get married when she found that out many, many months later.
Right.
But I stuck it out. And here's the thing that helped me from day one. I wasn't afraid to fail, and I implemented everything as fast as possible. I went to this mastermind. I started learning. The mastermind started in September. I started a podcast in October. I got my website, and I started going live on Periscope.
Awesome.
Right? When Periscope was a thing.
Around, yeah.
I did my first video ever on Periscope. Scared to death. There were 5 people on there. I had no following on social media. Like, I just woke up on a Monday morning and I said, I'm going to start. I don't know what to do. I just started talking and teaching and just pouring into, like, just having faith that I could figure it out.
Yeah.
And I just did it. I did a live video every day, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. for 6 months.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing. I'm learning all this stuff behind the scenes, but I'm doing a podcast. I'm creating blog posts. I'm doing live videos every day. I don't even have anything to sell. I didn't make $1 for 6 months. And I showed up every single day and did it. And we built a following. And then all of a sudden, I started paying attention. People are like, hey, do you have anything I can buy? And like the first, 20 times I just answered no. And then I'm like, wait a minute, Bob, maybe you should not answer no. You're doing this to hopefully make money. Like, come up with something to sell.
Right.
But I'm like, what the heck do I sell? So I asked the guy in the that was running the mastermind. He goes, just do coaching, because it's the easy thing to do. You literally can just get on a call with people, help them. I'm like, well, what do I charge? I'm like, I'm like, I'll charge $500 for like 2 months of coaching or something. He's like, dude, you're way underselling yourself. I'm like, well, what should I charge? He goes, and I'll never forget this advice he gave me, which is great advice. He goes, charge as much as you can afford to ask for without laughing in someone's face.
Wow.
So find that number. Like, if you said this number, you would laugh, but you back it down a little bit, ask that, and just charge that. Because he's like, you'd rather have just a handful of people paying you more money than a bunch of people that are maybe not as committed paying you less. And I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I put out there on a video one day, I just said, hey, I cleverly was like, I'm going to start doing some coaching. And I was actually working with one of my beta clients, and we did a coaching session. And then all of a sudden I had all these people, you do coaching? And in 1 week, I sold 15 $2,000 6-week coaching packages.
30 grand.
And it was literally right around Christmas. And I was stressing out because I didn't know how I was going to buy my wife, my fiance at the time, a Christmas present.
Yeah.
And that money gave me the ability to get her a present.
Wow.
And gave me a little bit of breathing room. But it was in that moment, I was like, wait a minute. I'm on to something. Like, that had never been my experience of money before. I was in, the network marketing space, but there's exponential income there, but never like that kind of like snap your fingers on demand money.
Yeah. Because
of everything that I had put in over the last 6 months. And then what happened was I started doing coaching, and I'm like, I hate this. Because I'm literally like a guidance counselor for an hour, and I'm like, this is the worst. I'm like, I don't want to do this. So I'm like, how do I do this in a way that's not going to like cannibalize my time?
Right.
So the guy's like, do a webinar. And I'm like, what's a webinar? And he explained a webinar. And I'm like, okay, I think I can do that. So I'm like, all right, everybody wants me to teach them Facebook. So I'm going to just do a webinar on Facebook. I'm just going to teach you how to use Facebook. There was no real like premise or offer. It was just like Facebook. And I got on Periscope, and I paid, I found some guy on Upwork to set up a sales page for me in ClickFunnels. And that was like a process and a half. And I got this thing set up. I was pre-selling it $37. And what I was going to do was, on the webinar at the end, I was going to sell like a 90-day group coaching program, which was basically me just pre-selling a course that I would create live with them over 90 days. Every 2 weeks, I would do a PowerPoint like training.
It's like a beta launch.
Yeah, exactly. And I have no idea what I'm doing, right? And I sell this, I go on Periscope and I say, hey guys, I'm doing this training in 10 days. It's on Facebook. Here's the link, you should buy. And I'm like, my fiance's like, do you think people are going to buy? And I'm like, I'm not sure. And I'm literally on Periscope, right? Imagine this, I'm on Periscope. And I start seeing the Stripe notifications come on my phone.
Oh my gosh.
Like, as soon as I announce it. And it's like I'm talking about every second. And I'm like, I'm so thrown off, because I'm like, what? I'm like, wait a minute. Like, people are buying this? Like, I don't even know what I'm going to teach them, and they're buying it from me. And I'm like freaking out. And I get done this 15-minute Periscope, and I go check the Stripe account. Within 15 minutes, I had made like 300 sales.
Whoa, that's insane.
And I'm like, and I went from excitement to like freaking out.
Yeah.
Because now I'm thinking, there's going to be 300 people 10 days from now expecting me to train them on something I don't even know what I'm going to teach them yet. And then I'm going to sell them this thing that I don't even know. So long story short, we sold 1,100 people bought it.
Wait, 1,100?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
1,100 people.
What'd you say the price point was on
$37.
So you made like 40 grand.
So I'm going into this thing, having made like 40, 50 grand. I don't know, whatever it is.
Jeez.
Already, I'm like, my life is never going to be the same. But get this. So the day of like 2 days before the webinar was supposed to happen, I had Webinar Jam. I bought an account.
Yeah.
I'd never done a webinar before.
Yeah.
I hadn't created the PowerPoint yet. And so I go into the Webinar Jam Facebook group, and I post in the group. People must have been like, there's no way this dude is serious. I post in the group. I'm like, hey, I'm Bob. I have a webinar in 2 days that I pre-sold that 1,100 people bought, could I pay someone to run the webinar for me and show me how to use Webinar Jam? Right?
See, this is what I love. You're just figuring it out as you go. And so many people just don't do that.
Yeah. And I had about a half dozen people respond. And this dude, Richard, was like, I got you, man. This is what I do.
Yeah.
So I paid Richard $500 to do the webinar. The day of, I'm talking about literally the webinar was at 9. At 7:45, I'm working on the PowerPoint, trying to get it done. I had never even gone through it or rehearsed it. I get on Webinar Jam. Richard does his thing. The training was 2 hours long.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And at the end, I just sold, and I talked about it like I believed it was the best thing in the world, and I didn't even know what it was going to be, but I just sold this idea to people.
Yeah.
And we did an additional $80,000 in sales within 24 hours.
Wow.
It was $497 for 90 days. $597, but $497 if you bought within the first, I literally just did everything. Like, this dude said, do this. I did it. I just did the exact thing he told me. And the first webinar, I made $113,000, I think was the total, whatever that wound up being.
That's insane.
And I remember I went on Periscope like the second day after the fact. And I got so emotional. I literally broke down and I was like in tears, just thanking people.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you don't understand what you just did for my life.
Right.
Like, my life will never be the same because of you and because of this. But it was in that moment, it shattered every single limiting belief that I had about money.
Right.
I spent my whole life believing that money was a function of time and effort and working harder.
Yeah.
I was taught that by my dad.
Well, I think that's.
I never understood the internal resistance that created around
society.
Success.
Teaches us that. Go get a job. You need a degree. Get a job. You trade time for dollars. That's what we're brought up thinking.
And it wasn't that I didn't work hard leading up to it, because I had to build that. But what I understood was, if you start learning how to work smarter and you figure out, like I always talk today, like success is a byproduct of service and growth. Yeah. It's a byproduct of helping other people solve problems. And there's ways through technology and working smarter that you can do that. I learned how to, I never knew, I was in network marketing, but I didn't know how to market. I only knew how to sell. Right. I learned the skill of marketing, and it changed my life. And it led me to believe that really you could work smarter and that you could create money in a way that you never could otherwise. And there I was. And then, to make a long story longer, within 11 months later, I found myself, I made $1 million my first year in 2016 doing this.
So, okay, I was going to ask you, that was 2016 then. So
we used the momentum of that. I literally did the exact same thing. As soon as that whole thing was done, I did it over again. I did my first live event. I didn't even know if anybody was going to show. I spent $10,000 for a room at the Hilton at the Philadelphia airport, did all this work. I was literally filling out name tags at the check-in desk the morning of the event because I had nobody helping me. I had 150 people show up to that event. Wow. I sold a mastermind at the event on stage for it was either $6,000 or $12,000. I did $200,000 in sales of a mastermind at my first event, teaching people something that I had only learned how to do myself 7 months earlier. Right. I didn't tell them that, but that was the truth of it. I just did it, and I just did it, and I just did it, and I took action because I knew that the faster I did it, the more I would grow. And even if I failed, I would learn a lesson that would help me become better. And that's where I got to. First year we did $1 million, and I've never looked back, and my life has never been the same since then. I mean, there's so many lessons in that. I think I'm reminded of this story that I forget where I heard it. I think it was, I work with a shaman. I think he's the one who told me this, but he had a sister who came to a family gathering. The sister's kind of like the black sheep, horrible credit, could never hold a job, never had any money, comes to the family gathering that they were having for a holiday or whatever in a brand new car. And everyone's like, how did you get a new car? How'd you get approved? Blah, blah, blah. And he, Don Javier looks over at everyone and goes, she got the car because she didn't know she wasn't supposed to have one. And when I hear you talk and you didn't get into a lot of the self-doubt or the worry or what if this, what if that, you kind of just took the advice and you're like, cool, let me go try this. Like you weren't sitting there like getting into the doubt, getting into the fear, getting into, I'm not supposed to have this, I'm not whatever. It's just such a humbling story. You're just so humble and
I mean this in a good way, kind of naive of like what was possible. And I think because you're operating there without the attachment of any of the fears, worries, red light stories, you're able to accomplish amazing things. But I think so many people aren't able to do that. They're not able to just, hey, let me go put $10,000 down and do this event. Hey, let me just do this webinar on Periscope and try to sell it and just see what happens. They get so much into those stories, which seems like you didn't really have to, but maybe you did, maybe you battled it.
Well, it wasn't that all that wasn't there, but the common thread in all of this was the underlying foundation of belief in myself. That was the thing that I learned how to do. I learned that if I could believe in myself more, that it would open up to greater possibilities in my life. And I experienced that in my network marketing business. I accomplished things I never thought would be possible for me.
Right.
And that foundation of belief in myself. And I recognize I might not have all the skills or information that I need to do this, but I understand how I get them. Right. I don't get them on the sidelines, getting ready to get ready and consuming and listening and learning. I get it by doing. Yeah. And that's what I did. So it was the common thread of the underlying belief in myself, which allowed me to have faith.
Yep. And is the
faith is the byproduct of belief.
The burn the boats philosophy, I think Tony Robbins talks about. So you've done that multiple times, and what we've heard so far of your story is you just went all in on that.
Well, you know what it is, and it's as simple as I just believe that things would go my way. Right? We talked about red light stories. That's all fear is imagining something you're going to do isn't going to go the way you want.
Yeah.
Faith is imagining it will. We call those green light stories. I just learned how to start mastering my own mind and get really intentional on the story I was telling myself so that I could feel the way that I needed to feel to do the things effectively that I wanted to do. And I created it first in my mind, and that gave me the confidence to go out and then do it in real life.
Well, I think there's so many people that just don't understand the lens in which you see the world that literally creates your reality. Like if you think the world is out to get you and that's what's going on in your head, then the world in your reality, the way you're going to experience life will literally be the world is out to get you, and you will find every example to back that up. And the same thing's true at the opposite. If you believe that things are possible and the world is good, then you will see the world as good and you will experience the world as good. And most people that are on the world is bad side never want to believe that for some reason. Obviously they get some kind of benefit out of it, but it is the lens in which you see the world starts with your beliefs and your thoughts and your patterns. I do have a question for you though. You said you were building the personal brand for about 6 months and not selling anything. Were you waiting to sell, or did you just not think to sell anything?
I honestly, when I started out, I wasn't even thinking about selling, as crazy as that is to say.
It's so funny.
People always say, like, what's your secret to success? I'm going to tell you what my secret to success is. I believe in myself enough to give me the foundation to truly care about other people before I care about myself.
Wow. That's powerful.
Like most people, they have an intent to serve and they want to care and they want to care. But the truth of it is this, is if you lack that belief in yourself and if scarcity and fear is what's driving you to work so hard and do what you do, you're limiting your ability to truly be there for others because you always need that result in order to feel better about yourself. So you're always attached to the result. You're focused on it. Like I straight up showed up from day one. The video that I did with 5 people on there was the same intensity and energy as when I had 500 people. Like my thought process from day one is that if one person thinks enough of what I have to say to want to hear it, I'm going to truly focus on helping them. And that's like the way I grew it. I grew it by just serving that one person to the best of my ability. But I was so passionate about helping people, and I still am today. It's what, like, I'm obsessive about our programs and what we do. Yeah. I mean, how can we help more people? But I was like that from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that just was something, I don't know how I got that way, but I've always been that way.
I think what it is most people don't realize when you're stuck in the fear and the worries and the concerns, that's actually a very selfish approach to business because like you said, the focus is all on you and not the other people, not who you can help, not whose suffering you can end. It's all about you trying to take care of your insecurities or your fears and your worries. It's kind of funny because we had Rick Mulready, who I know you know, on the podcast a while ago. And he talked about building his personal brand too. And he was just like, I wasn't making any money. And I just realized one day, it's because I wasn't selling anything. He's like, I made no offers. I was just focusing on building my brand.
I can relate. Yeah. Not so by the way, like, don't recommend my exact business plan, but if I had to do it overall again, I'd have something that I could offer people. But at the end of the day, I built up so much goodwill and trust with people, Brandon, because I wasn't selling and I really was just showing up for them.
Yeah.
They couldn't wait to buy what I had to share with them. Now, but listen though, I will acknowledge one thing.
Yeah.
Because you talk about this all the time, and I want to like validate what you say to people.
Right.
I did that in 2016.
Yeah.
All you had to do in 2016 was just show up.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, if you just had the courage to show up and just talk, teach, and help, you could have been successful.
Not a lot of competition back then.
Yeah, it's not the same today.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to really evolve and grow. And, you know, taking your course was one of the greatest things that I've done for my business in the last year, because it really forced me to be smarter about my messaging. And messaging for us has catapulted our business into the next stratosphere, because I reached a point where doing what I was doing, my business plateaued.
Yeah.
And it was plateauing at an amazing level. I'm not complaining, but I was like, how do we get it? Like, there's something missing. How do we get it to the next level? So I had to reinvent myself. And a big part of that was, you know, the way that I was thinking about what I was doing.
Yeah. And then, like you said, that's what I talk about all the time, is back then, 10 to 5 years ago, is like, there's not a lot of competition. So you just showed up and served, you would probably do well. But nowadays, a lot of people are doing that. And so it's like, what separates you? So can we talk about from 2016 to where you guys are now? What did it look like going from 2016 to your plateau and then breaking through that? Like, what did that journey look like?
Yeah. So we did $1 million our first year, and I'm not afraid to share numbers. So I think it's helpful for people to understand.
Right.
Second year, I ran like the same playbook. We did events. Okay. I did a mastermind. I started creating evergreen courses in my second year, because I realized like I didn't want to have to deliver it live. So I took the seed of that live course and I evergreened it in the second year. And that gave me a little bit more time freedom. I started to build a small team. I hired a couple of people. I think we did, in my second year, I think we did 1.6 million.
Okay.
And then I had a baby. And that changed everything for me. Because I realized that I needed to figure out a way to start working much smarter and give up more control, because I was still essentially a solopreneur that just had people that were supposed to be helping me, but they were just slowing me down in my mind, because I just wanted to do everything.
Yep.
But I reached a point in my business where I realized I couldn't, and I had this little baby boy staring at me, and I didn't want to do it anymore. So I spent the next year really trying to build out a team and systems, and we launched a membership program.
Okay.
Because the business was very cyclical. Like we would have these great, like typical launch cycle, great months. Then it would kind of go nowhere and I'd have to launch again. And I'm like, well, I want more time freedom and I want to work smarter. So I love the idea of recurring revenue. So I launched a membership program in 2017. That took off like crazy. And I think we did 2.6 million in our 2.4 million in our third year. And then we plateaued at that for 2 years.
Okay.
So I actually did a little bit less. I think we did 2.1. And then last year we did 2.2 million, but I plateaued for 2 years.
Gotcha.
My whole business, I scaled it down big time, simplified it. For 2 years, the only thing I had was one membership program and one live event that we did. I got rid of my mastermind because that wasn't bringing me any joy anymore. I didn't want to teach online marketing anymore.
Yeah.
I just wanted to focus on serving that specific niche that we were in. I was trying to come up with like my unique philosophy to do that. We came up with that. And for 2 years, I streamlined the business. I built out my team. I did less and less, and the business kind of just was where it was. But I was happy with that because I was like a new father. I was, my son was taking up a lot of my time, as they tend to do. And then last year, we made a big shift. And the big shift for us was around the structure of our programs, coming up with a more clear and concise framework that we were teaching, where, we were like a traditional membership program where if you joined, you got 2 years worth of content. Because I was creating every month, I was creating a new training live for the membership. We were building up a library. And And there was a lot of great stuff, but the number one thing that we would find is people would join and they would immediately get overwhelmed and they would leave. And I was going live in the group 3 to 5 times per week.
Jeez.
Because I had that same mindset that I just need to show up for people to keep them engaged. And what I found was that it had the opposite effect. We had terrible churn. Every single launch, we would build it right back up to we plateaued at about 3,500 members, which was still amazing. It was $57 a month, but we would get to about 3,500, or we'd go a little above it at a launch, and then it would fall back down to 3,000. That was like our low water mark, and it was just up and down. And we just were where we were.
Right.
And I was like, something needs to change here. Now, look, if I could have easily just mailed it in and just kept doing that, but I'm like, I want to help more people. That's always the thing that drives me. I want to help more people. There's something bigger we need to do here. So we made a radical change. We created a framework with 12, we call them missions, like a distinct beginning and an end. We simplified it. And so when a new student signed up, it was a very clear path, 12 trainings.
Yeah.
And people loved it. It was a lot clearer. But the other big change that we made was messaging. Mm. And this was where you came in and where you played a big part in helping us with this. So what was interesting was the overarching message of this would be a real valuable lesson, I think, to people listening. My program's called the Legacy Leadership Academy. And we talk a lot about what we call this identity of a legacy leader. Like, legacy leader is now our future-paced hero.
Yeah.
But being a legacy leader meant standing for something different in the space, right? I always talked about legacy leadership. But if I'm honest, I always kind of struggled with explaining to people what that was.
Yeah.
And as I was doing it, I could just tell it wasn't connecting. Inside of the program, we had this thing that was like kind of hidden in there that we sometimes talked about, but not really, called Love, Serve, Grow.
Right.
And Love, Serve, Grow was kind of like, that's what legacy leaders believed, right? They led with love. They focused on service. They understood that their ability to grow and help others grow is what creates financial success for them.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was every time we talked about that, which was more of a value-driven message, people would be like, yes. And I was like, we need to completely change everything we do about talking about this program. I said, the message isn't legacy leadership. The message is love, serve, grow.
Right.
That needs to become the framework. Now, I didn't change the name of the program because it was the Legacy Leadership Academy. I had the URL on it, but what it became, the love, serve, grow framework. That's what we teach in legacy leadership. And everything we talked about was just love, serve, grow, love, serve, grow, love, serve, grow. Every video back to love, serve, grow, love, serve, right? And this is what you teach, right? All your content comes back to your framework. I did that this is a relatively recent change. Right. I did it in the third quarter of last year. Okay. We made a big shift, like publicly talking more about love, serve, grow, putting it out there. The last quarter of 2020, we had our best quarter ever.
Amazing.
And this year, we've already surpassed our entire revenue of last year. So we're on track to do over 4 million in revenue this year.
Damn. I didn't know any of that. That's amazing. That's a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's a lot of things that I could attribute that we've done differently. We've just, through teaching our framework for a year, we've gotten clarity on how we really help people, and we've shifted more into the mindset coaching piece, which is something we do different. But I'm telling you, the messaging was a huge part of attracting our ideal customer. We got really clear, like, on who our struggling avatar was, on what we do, and people can, like, our biggest challenge now is people just don't know we exist.
Right.
But when they find us, they're like, and here's how I knew we were on the right track.
Yeah.
Never once did I have somebody say, yeah, I want my team to be legacy leadership. I would hear people all the time saying, I want my team to implement love, serve, grow. Yeah. I want them to be love, serve, grow. And that was how I knew. I was like, okay, now we're on the right track.
That's what I talk about, is when people are repeating your messaging back to you, or they're coming to you for that unique framework or the unique solution that you have, you're onto something. And by the way, thank you for saying all of this stuff. My intention was not to like talk about how
No,
great
yeah, I mean, look, this
was.
wasn't pre-planned, but I mean, it's the truth. Like, it's the truth. The thing that and here's what's so crazy. Like, I built a multiple 7-figure business without really having any idea how to explain to people what we really do.
Right.
Like, if you would have gotten on one of my sales presentations, I'm not proud of this, but whatever. Yeah. Like, my sales presentation was me training some random topic for 30 minutes. And then at the end, just like jamming in, hey, by the way, here's what we do. You should join.
Yeah. That's how most people do it. Yeah.
There's no consistency in message. There's no connection back to, but it worked. But then I started noticing like we've reached our limitation of it working.
Yeah.
So I knew that I needed to evolve and grow. And when I really started leaning into messaging and realizing like, this is how we are going to separate ourselves from the competition, because there's nobody that's talking about what we talk about.
Right.
We've started to attract new customers to us at a level that we never have before.
Well, the thing too is there's two main things here. What I loved about working with you is that you have such a level of mastery of what you do. Like number one, obviously you truly care, and it's very apparent just from this episode how much you care about people in general and obviously your students, but there's a mastery in how you work. Like, the way in which to work with people, and you've truly mastered that. And when you have that mastery, it allows you to communicate it at such a different level. So yes, you use our messaging too, but it's also because you have that level of deepness and mastery that you're able to do that. But number two, the second thing that I think is really important that you're demonstrating here is that most people don't recognize, is that your unique solution in your framework not only helps your messaging, but it helps your program become a much better program. It brings clarity to the program. It brings people different results. It helps the completion rate of the program. So I would imagine you're probably seeing better results with students now that you're even more clear on the messaging as well. Would you?
It's night and day.
Yeah.
We created a second iteration of our framework that we call the Love, Serve, Grow framework. I kind of like took the 3 years worth of training that I did, and I grabbed like the pieces that I thought were most important, and we put it together in an order that we thought logically made sense.
Right.
But what I noticed was that that what was missing was like, so we have like, we're really heavy in business strategy, systems, leadership development, like all this tactical stuff, and we're really good with that.
Right.
But what I realized was people were going through these trainings and they really weren't getting what they needed to get out of it. And then what I understood was what was really missing was the mindset piece for them, right? Because, like if they lack belief, they're just going to fall right back into those old same patterns. So what we did was in the third quarter of last year, along with shifting messaging, we started leading with this training that we created essentially a framework for building belief. We call it the formula for transformation.
I love that.
And it became the foundational piece of everything we do. We take people, all of our students go through this intensive process when they first begin, where basically all we're doing is we're teaching them how to recognize their red light stories and understand that lack of belief is really the thing that's held them back. And we just created this like kind of program that really works to help people. And when we started shifting people at the level of belief in the beginning, our students' results started going through the roof. So it was like the compounding effect of people really changing in a meaningful way. And that started to spread. But then we started to talk about that and lead with it and get clear, like, this is really the biggest problem that we help people solve.
Yeah.
Is just belief and understanding what that is. Because everybody in our profession, like, the word belief is just thrown around. I mean, you hear it so much. You got to believe. And I remember like my mentor would say, you got to believe. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like, how do you, how do you just snap your fingers and believe that something you've never done before is possible?
Yeah.
And most people don't ever get the belief they need because they don't recognize the limiting beliefs they have, but they don't have a framework to get there. We created that just out of a need.
Right.
My desire to want to help our students. I'm like, I need to come up with a training that can help them because I know that's why they're struggling. So we released that. That really started to change things for us. And, and it's just the constant, like, how can we be better? I tell people when I started, I just taught what everybody else taught.
Yep.
I did it in my own way with my own stories. And that's how I gave it my unique spin. And I remember one of my early mentors was Brendan Burchard. And I remember Brendan said this, he said, look, to be world-class, you've got to develop your own unique perspective on the stuff that you teach.
Yeah.
But that doesn't come. Like, it took me 3 years to even come up with how I'm going to do what I do differently than everybody else.
Yeah.
right? It was like, it was this very painful, almost birthing process of coming up with my vision of how what I want to do is different. And Love, Serve, Grow took me 5 years
Yeah.
to come get clarity on like, this is what we actually do. But where I get excited is, and this is also something that's crazy for me to say, up until the third quarter of last year, I never fully 100% believed in what I was selling people.
Interesting. How did you come to
like
that
I
realization?
knew what they needed was in there, and I knew I had but I also saw that the current form that the program was in wasn't giving people what they needed.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. You knew there was
right.
more.
So like I knew that it wasn't where it needed to be, but my almost obsession, I'll call it a healthy obsession, to make it better, to create something that's world class, really focusing on how can I make this the best program out there, got me to a point. I am so confident in, like, I'll just straight up be like, you're stupid if you don't join my program. Like, I don't say it that way, but I think that,
right. Yeah.
Like, I think, like, how can you possibly do this without knowing what I teach? I believe that with everything that's in me, and people sense that when I talk to them.
I mean, I feel the same.
You got to learn how to develop that level of belief in what you do.
Yeah. And that's what I meant when I said there's a level of mastery of what you do. When like people throw the word around belief and you got to believe, so surface level. It's so like, okay, cool. Yeah. Everyone, you got to believe. And that begs the question, how do you do that? You have a level of mastery because of your experience and your down moments and having to go through things yourself. You're able to develop a framework that's not just like, hey guys, I'm going to show you how to believe. You need to believe something, but I'm also going to show you a framework and how to actually get to these deep rooted layers. A lot of people in the space don't do that. They don't focus on a level of mastery of knowing to be able to even create a program like yours or like mine. A lot do, but one of the biggest problems that come with messaging is that people stay so surface level and they regurgitate so much stuff. And what I always think about is the hero's journey. The guy, I forget the guy's name, but whoever created the hero's journey, that is his proprietary information framework that has now become an industry norm. When I create my frameworks, when I create my work, I'm looking at it to become an industry standard. Like NLP was something that someone created at some point that became a standard. When I look at what you're doing, I see you doing the exact same thing. You're creating something that's yours, but will become a standard. And I think that's what Brennan was saying, is this, that's what world class is. So yeah, I love it. So
but it takes time to get there, right? We can't let the desire to create something world-class keep us from starting, because I never would have gotten here unless I started.
100%. I mean, it took, like you said, it took you 5 years. It took me about 10 years to get to where I am today. And I really know I'm only a fraction of where we're actually going. So yeah, it does take time. I have 5 or 4 rapid fire questions I want to ask you to wrap up this interview. By the way, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your numbers, being vulnerable with us. This was an amazing and very powerful episode. So I'm going to wrap up with 5 questions. But before we do, for anyone who wants to follow you online or follow any of your stuff, where can they go to learn more about you?
So everything I do, we create under the name Your Virtual Upline. So our YouTube channel is under Your Virtual Upline. And then on Instagram, if you just search Your Virtual Upline, I have a podcast that is we've been doing for 5 years. We've got, I think, almost 300 episodes now, do 2 episodes a week. It's called the Your Virtual Upline podcast. So those would be the places that I'd recommend connecting with me.
Amazing. Okay, so the first question I have for you is actually a question I wanted to ask earlier, so I wrote it down. But to you, what is the difference between marketing and selling?
Well, the way that I say it is, marketing is passive. Selling to me is more of an active, proactive measure. We market to create opportunities for us to sell, but they couldn't be 2 different skill sets in terms of like what you need to do. I use the analogy of planting seeds and watering them. It's almost like when we're marketing, we're planting seeds, right? We're creating awareness. We're letting people know we exist and what we do. But most of the time, those seeds are not going to just grow on their own. A big mistake that our students make is they're doing lots of content on social media, but I kind of jokingly call it the post and pray method of building your business. Like I post and just pray. I hope somebody will message me wanting to buy, but pretty soon we figure out that's not really the way that it works.
Yeah.
So you've got to be incredibly proactive about building a business. You got to be reaching out and connecting and creating opportunities. So it's finding the balance between those two things. Selling to me is a more personalized interaction where you're prescribing specific solutions to people's problems.
Gotcha.
Marketing, we're putting out more in a generality. Here's what we can do and here's how we can help people. But in a sales interaction, we're really finding out specifically how we can help that one person.
Gotcha.
And, that's the way that I view these two pieces fitting together. And I think you got to find the right balance, right? You got to find the right balance. Most people are doing too much marketing and not enough selling. They're not trying to create enough opportunities. And I think all of that is really, it's just geared out of fear, right? Because why else would we not want to sell if we didn't believe in ourselves and what we have to offer people?
Right. Exactly. Love that. Do you make most decisions with your head or your heart?
I would say probably my heart.
Yeah.
And then my integrator then uses her head to tell me if something is stupid. So
it's the exact same over here.
I've been very, I'm a classic visionary for sure. I know our EOS people.
Yeah.
I've been very blessed with an amazing team of people that, bring me back to earth sometimes when there's things that I want to do that don't make total sense. I know when to dig in and fight, but I'm definitely more of a heart-centered person in terms of just my personality type and the way that I do things, operating from my gut. So
I'm the same way. Yeah. Okay. Entrepreneurship, should it be taught in schools?
I think it should definitely be an option of being taught in schools for sure. I mean, I view entrepreneurship really akin to personal growth and professional development, right? It's like,
100%.
I don't know whether it ever will be in traditional education, but like, I think about the life skills that I've gotten just being able to have more of an entrepreneurial way of thinking. And I also think that's where the world is going.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not, more 100%. Of an entrepreneurial viewpoint of what we do. Even I think like when we think of the events of COVID and what have happened, how companies are being forced to change the dynamics of their workforce and people having more of freedom and flexibility in the way that they work. I think anybody could be served by having more of an entrepreneurial mindset in terms of what they do.
I do too. Couldn't agree more. Last question. What is the biggest pivotal moment that changed your entire life? If you could narrow it down to one thing.
Well, I'll go back to, I shared a little bit about the story. The very first time I ever spoke publicly in front of a crowd of people.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. I was about a year into my business. I avoided, I talked about public speaking as one of my worst fears, and I knew it was something that I had to do, but I just wasn't willing to do it. And we used to do these Saturday morning trainings for new distributors. They would come and we would train them. It was down at the Ramada Inn at the Philadelphia airport. And for 1 year, I would drive every Saturday morning and I'd go sit in the seats and I'd listen and get excited. And I hadn't really had much success.
Yeah.
And one Saturday morning I showed up and it happened. They came to me right before the meeting and they said, "Hey, we want you to open up the meeting today."
Oh no.
And I as I'm sharing this story, my hand to God, I'm literally, I can feel the way I felt. Like sheer horror overcame me. And I remember looking and I was like, "You're kidding, right?" Like, no. And they're like, "No, you're going to do it." And I had this brief moment where I was like, I looked over at the door and I'm like, should I make a run for it? Just like leave? And I'm like, well, the problem is if I leave, I don't think I can ever come back. And I really want this thing to work.
Yeah.
Before I could process these thoughts, I felt a hand on my back and I started getting physically pushed to the front. I mean, look, we're talking about a room with like 20 people in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I still hold to this day. Sometimes it's scarier to talk in a small group like that than it is bigger groups.
Oh, it totally is. Yeah.
But they pushed me to the front of the room. And I just remember I had this feeling like this physical reaction to this fear that I knew I was going to have to do it. Like, I remember thinking like this this has got to be what it feels like when you die.
Mm.
Like my body I was losing control of my body. And I got in front of the room. I had a glass of water in my hands because I was hanging out in the back of the room like I always did, just drinking and having fun, drinking water, having fun.
Yeah.
I was shaking so bad the water was spilling on my hand.
Oh,
and my
gosh.
friend from the back was like, put the water down. I put the water on the table. I don't even know all I was supposed to do was just say, hey, here's my name. Thanks for coming out. Turn your cell phones off. Introduce the speaker.
Yeah.
I don't remember what I said, but I remember this. I introduced the speaker and then I went and I sat down in my seat in the back of the room. Now, typically you wait in front of the room until the speaker comes up and they shake your hand and they say, hey, give it up for... He came up to the front of the room and it was like this awkward moment. And he's like, give it up for Bob. And I was like, I'm going to die. And I was mortified. And I remember leaving that meeting, right?
Yeah.
Getting into my car. And this weird feeling came over me. And it was almost like this urge, like, I'm like, I want to do that again.
Mm.
Like and I remember thinking like, what do you mean you want to do it again? You just totally embarrass yourself. But I remember thinking, I want to do it again.
Right.
Cause I'm like, I know if I do it again, I can do it better.
Right.
And what I talk about, that was the spark. That was the seed. That was my first time recognizing, having a feeling like I faced my fear and I did something I didn't think I could do. And in that moment, I felt more confident because I did it and I wanted to do it again.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to something that was inside of me that I never knew was there. And look, it wasn't like I got up and started just crushing it. I mean, it took me years of just learning and growing and trying to get better to refine these gifts and these skills and what I have today. But that was a turning point in my life because it was the first time, even though I was physically forced to face that fear, it was really the first time I ever did it in a meaningful way. And it set me on a different course for my life.
Yeah. I mean, it showed you how courageous you could be too, to be afraid of something and to do it, but not only do it, but want to do it again as well. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs miss is it's okay to have the fear, but it's how courageous are you going to be in those moments, like to do it anyways. And you demonstrated that beautifully today. So Bob, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. Appreciate you so much. And for anyone who wants to learn more about Bob, just make sure you follow him online, podcast, Instagram, all that good stuff at Your Virtual Upline. So Bob, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. This was great.
Cool. And for all of you listeners who have not left us a review yet, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. I'd be so grateful for that. The more support we get, the better podcast we can produce for you. So head over there, leave us a review, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Take care, everyone. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.